This is George Sicalius, and this is Sprint 9. So, here are my sprites. I have a reticle positioned at the center, with its origin being the center of the sprite, and I have a Stitch being positioned at the center, but his origin pushed, I think, 100 pixels to the left. So yeah, they don't move around. They stay positioned where they should on screen. And yeah. So, okay. I'll start with my image manager. So my image manager, it's just like every other asset manager. It's a singleton which stores images within a map with a corresponding string to be used to access each specific image. Um, so yeah, nothing terribly new. Um, in resource loader, so the user has to load in the texture for the corresponding sprite, the model for the sprites, and the shader, and then it has to load in the image by passing in the string and the texture which will be used as the image. Um, so to get my sprites working, I created a user side object just to create the sprites, just to test the sprites. So this is sprite test, setting my world, my position, rotation, all that stuff. I also created a sprite object to help streamline just managing each sprite. So instead of the game object storing a graphic sprite object, sprite object stores the graphic object, and it also stores the origin. So I'll show you that later. So I create a sprite object by passing in the image, its position, its height, and its width. I can then set its origin. So main sprite bring the reticle, setting it to the center of the image, and then Stitch, offsetting it by 100 pixels. And then in my update, all I'm doing is I'm changing the rotation and then passing the world to the sprite objects. So that takes us to the actual sprite object. Show you the header first. So yeah, as I said, it stores a graphic sprite object. The origin point, the width and height, if the user wants to access that, and the world, its current world. So back to actually setting the world. So if I'm remembering my linear algebra correctly, what this does is it takes the world transform and then it applies it within the space of the origin. So in essence, rotating it around the origin and sizing it according to the origin and all that stuff. So yeah. So that's sprite object. And also to render the actual sprite object, the user has to call render on the sprite object, and that will render the actual graphic object attached to that using the orthographic camera. So I decided to go with creating a new ubble just for the drawable 2D stuff. My main reason for doing it was because I was concerned about the order of processing. I know that the models have to be processed before the sprites, so I figured it'd be a lot easier just to have a separate method specifically for the sprites and then one specifically for the models. so I wouldn't have to worry about sifting through that call and placing the correctly placing the whatchamacallit, render calls. Um, so yeah, drawable, it's pretty much the same thing as drawable, except it's drawable 2D. Um, has its own list of registration, deregistration commands. Um, to take care of the order of processing, what I did is within the drawable manager, after I process my drawable models, I'll then process my drawable 2D objects. Um, so yeah, I think that's it. Um, yeah.